I still remember the first time I heard the word stepfather fall from her lips. It was a summer afternoon years ago, sunlight slanting through the living room blinds in thin golden stripes. She must have been no older than 10, her hair tied in pigtails, her cheeks smudged with the dust of the playground. She was showing a friend from school the family pictures on the mantel. My photograph, me in my work shirt, grease on my sleeves from the garage, stood next to her mother's smile. "That's my stepfather," she said, casual as tossing a pebble into a pond. Her friend nodded, not thinking much of it, but for me the ripples have never stopped spreading. It's strange how a single word can carry the weight of an ocean. Step, stepfather. Like a step you take in between, not the real destination, not the place where you belong. Something temporary, replaceable. I smiled back then, pretending it didn't sting, pretending it didn't scrape the inside of my chest raw. But even now, decades later, as I sit here in my chair, my bones heavier with years, my heart stitched together by both joy and sorrow, that word still echoes. I was never her father by blood. That was true. I came into her life after her real father had long vanished, leaving behind an empty seat at the dinner table and a woman carrying more burdens than one pair of shoulders should ever bear. Her mother, my late wife, used to tell me, "Love her as if she were yours and one day she'll see." I believed her. I wanted to believe her, and so I tried. For years I tried. I woke up before dawn to pack her lunch, even though she'd often leave it behind. I sat in the bleachers of her school games, even though she never looked into the crowd for me. I worked double shifts so her piano lessons could continue, though she slammed the keys with teenage fury and told me I didn't understand music anyway. I was there, always there, even when I was invisible. But being invisible has a way of grinding you down like waves against stone. The cruelest part isn't the rejection itself. No, the cruelest part is the silence. The long stretches of ordinary days where you give, and all you hear in return is the absence of acknowledgement. It seeps into you, that silence, until you start to question if you even exist in their world at all. That's what it was like being a stepfather. And now, at 68, my hair a fading map of silver, my hands stiff from arthritis, I sit by the window and think about all the years that slipped through me like water through a sieve. I am telling you this because stories like mine rarely get told. People talk about fathers and sons, about mothers and daughters, about the bonds of blood. But what about us? The ones who stepped into the middle of someone else's story. The ones who volunteered for love, knowing we might never be chosen in return. This is my story, a story of silence and sacrifice. A story of letters kept hidden for 20 years, pressed between old shoeboxes and forgotten sweaters. Letters that hold the truth my daughter never knew. Letters that, when she finally read them, broke her heart open in ways I never could. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. I need to start at the beginning, not the beginning of my life, but the beginning of ours, hers and mine. Her name is Anna. She was 6 the first time I met her. I was a mechanic back then, running a small shop on the edge of town. Her mother, Clara, had brought in her car for repairs, a rickety old Honda Civic that rattled like a tin can each time it hit a pothole. I remember wiping my hands on a rag, looking up, and seeing her standing by the car. A little girl with eyes too big for her face, clutching a stuffed rabbit with fur worn thin. She hid behind Clara's skirt, peeking at me like I was a stranger trespassing on her world, which, in truth, I was. That night Clara and I talked. One talk turned into dinner. Dinner turned into laughter. Laughter into love, and love eventually into a marriage that stitched two broken halves into something whole. But Anna never asked for me. Children rarely do. At first, I thought time would do the work. That if I showed up consistently, if I filled the empty chair at the parent-teacher meetings, if I clapped loudest at her recitals, she'd see me not as a stand-in but as her dad. But children's hearts don't work on the logic of persistence. They work on the memory of who left and the suspicion of who stayed. Years rolled by like pages flipping too quickly. She grew taller, sharper, her laughter less frequent. And I grew more cautious, learning the rhythm of disappointment. I still recall the day she told me not to come to her middle school ceremony. "It's for family," she said flatly, shutting her bedroom door in my face. I stood in the hallway holding the cheap bouquet I had picked up from the corner store, listening to the muffled sound of music from behind her door. Family. The word cut sharper than stepfather ever did. But I went anyway, sitting in the back row where no one would notice. When they called her name, she walked across the stage, chin high, her eyes skimming the crowd. She never looked my way. I clapped quietly, careful not to be too loud, careful not to embarrass her. I left before the pictures were taken, before the cake was cut. That was how it always went. Me in the background, me in the shadows, me trying not to cast one too dark. Sometimes, late at night, I'd take out the box of letters Clara had written for Anna. She wrote them before the sickness took her, cancer, relentless and cruel, gnawing away at her until she was only a whisper of the woman I married. She made me promise in those final days that I'd keep the letters safe. "Not yet," she whispered, her hand trembling in mine. "Not until she's ready, you'll know when." So I hid them. For 2 decades I hid them. Every time Anna looked at me with those cold eyes, every time she called me stepfather, every time she brushed past me like I was furniture, I wanted to give her the letters, to scream, "Your mother wanted you to know who I am. She wanted you to know how much I love you." But I didn't, because a promise is a promise, and love, real love, waits. If you've made it this far into my story, I want to thank you. These memories aren't easy to dig up. They ache like old wounds that never fully healed, but I'm sharing them because maybe someone out there has felt invisible too. Maybe you know what it's like to give everything and still be called not enough. If you do, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to follow me through the rest of this journey, because the story doesn't end here. In fact, it only begins here with a word that haunted me for years: stepfather. And the letters are still waiting. They say fatherhood is measured in the little things: the scraped knees you bandage, the lunches you pack, the bedtime stories you whisper when the house finally goes quiet. For me, it was measured in silence. Silence as I slipped out of bed at 5 in the morning to start the car, letting the heater run so she wouldn't shiver on the ride to school. Silence as I sat in the bleachers during soccer games, hands buried deep in my jacket pockets, clapping only when the whole crowd clapped, because cheering alone would only embarrass her. Silence as I worked late nights at the garage, the smell of oil and sweat clinging to me, while she studied in the bedroom I had repainted 3 times to match whatever color she liked that year. I gave her everything I knew how to give, but I gave it quietly, because she never wanted me to be loud. She never wanted me to take up space in her world. One winter stands out in my mind, sharper than the rest. The roof of our old house leaked, water dripping through the attic like tears from the sky. I couldn't afford to hire anyone to fix it. Money was always tight: school fees, clothes she wanted to fit in with the other kids, piano lessons her mother insisted on. So I climbed up there myself in the middle of a snowstorm. The shingles were brittle under my boots, the cold searing my hands. Each hammer strike felt like my bones were splitting in two. But I told myself, if she can sleep warm tonight, if she can open her books without water staining the pages, then it's worth it. She never knew. The next morning she stormed into the kitchen, upset that her friends had new winter coats and she didn't. She slammed the door behind her on her way to school. I just watched her go, then tightened my scarf and headed to the garage. My shoulders ached, my lungs wheezed, but I fixed cars all day with a smile that wasn't real. Because that's what sacrifice looks like. It's invisible. I remember her 11th birthday. She wanted a dollhouse, the kind with tiny furniture, chandeliers no bigger than a coin, painted shutters that actually opened. It cost more than I made in a week. I stayed late at the shop for 3 months straight, taking every extra job that came my way. My fingers were blistered, my back screamed each night. But on the morning of her birthday, the dollhouse sat in the living room, wrapped in paper that barely covered it. Her eyes lit up when she saw it. For a brief second, I thought maybe this was it. Maybe this was the bridge between us. But then she asked if it was from her mother. I said yes. because sometimes love means letting someone else take the credit. I watched her hug Clara tight, the way I always wished she would hug me. I stood back, clapping my hands softly, smiling as if my heart weren't breaking in two. The truth is, I never needed her to call me Dad. I just wanted her to see me. One summer when she was in high school, I saved enough to take her and her friends to the amusement park. They laughed the whole drive, music blasting from the backseat. I rode the roller coasters with them, even though my stomach turned inside out. I held their bags, bought them cotton candy, took their pictures as they screamed on the rides. When the photos were printed, I wasn't in any of them. I was always the one holding the camera. That night when we got home, she thanked her mother for taking us. Clara smiled sadly and glanced at me, but I just shrugged. I had grown used to being invisible in the pictures of her life. Not every sacrifice was grand. Most were tiny, almost forgettable. The nights I slipped an extra blanket over her when she kicked hers off. The mornings I drove across town for the only cereal she'd eat. The afternoons I fixed her bike chain, only for her to ride away without a word. You don't tally those things when you're a parent, you just do them. And yet when no one notices, when no one even remembers, they become heavy stones you carry alone. I carried them for years. Sometimes Clara would notice. She'd place her hand on mine across the dinner table, her eyes saying what her lips didn't. Thank you. I clung to those moments like a man clings to driftwood in the middle of the sea, because I needed something, anything, to remind me I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't wasting my life loving a child who didn't love me back. But the cruel truth of step-parenting is that you can give your whole heart and still feel like a guest in your own home. There was one night when Anna was 16 that still burns in me. She had stayed out late at a party. I drove around town for hours, headlights slicing through the dark, heart hammering against my ribs. I finally found her sitting on the curb outside a friend's house, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She climbed into the car without a word. I wanted to ask what happened, but I knew she wouldn't tell me, so I just drove. Halfway home, she whispered, "Don't tell Mom." I promised I wouldn't. When we got back, she slipped upstairs without looking at me. I sat in the kitchen alone, hands shaking, replaying the fear I had felt all night. That's when I realized, sometimes sacrifice means carrying someone else's secrets too. I wonder even now if she remembers any of it. The lunches, the rides, the roofs, the sleepless nights. I wonder if she ever looks back and sees the man behind the curtain, pulling the levers to keep her world spinning. Or maybe, to her, it was always just life, things that happen without faces, without effort, invisible sacrifices. But to me, they were everything. When you're a stepfather, the line between hope and heartbreak is razor thin. Every small gesture feels like a gamble. Maybe this will be the one she remembers. Maybe this will be the moment she finally sees me. And when it doesn't come, you swallow the ache, go back to work, and try again tomorrow. That's what fatherhood looked like for me. A long string of silent sacrifices, strung together like beads on a necklace no one would ever wear. But I kept them anyway, because love, even unreturned, is still love. And one day, though I didn't know it yet, those sacrifices, silent as they were, would speak louder than I ever could. If you're still listening, thank you. Thank you for walking with me through these memories that feel heavier than they should. If any of this has touched your heart, if you've ever been unseen, unthanked, unrecognized, then maybe you'll understand why I'm sharing this story. Hit the like button, subscribe if you want to keep following. There are more sacrifices to share, more truths to uncover. Because the letters I kept, they are still waiting. And the day Anna found them would change everything. There's a moment every step-parent dreads. The moment you realize your love is not just unseen, but unwanted. For me, that realization came in waves, each one pulling a little more of me under until I could hardly breathe. It started small, a shrug, a turned shoulder, a muttered word under her breath. I told myself it was just adolescence, the storm every parent must weather. But for me, the storm never cleared. Anna learned early how to keep me at a distance. When she was 12, her middle school held a parent-student talent night. Families crowded the gym, bleachers stacked with proud faces. I had helped her practice for weeks, driving her to rehearsals, holding the flashlight as she worked on her little skit in the garage, timing her lines with a stopwatch so she could learn her pacing. I thought maybe this time she would let me stand in the light with her. But on the night of the performance, she asked her mother to sit beside her, leaving me a space at the far end of the row. When her name was called, she glanced at Clara, not at me. And when the applause came, her eyes swept the crowd but skipped right over the place where I sat. I clapped anyway. My palms stung with every strike, not from the force but from the emptiness. Afterward, families gathered to take photos. I hovered nearby, waiting for her to call me in. She didn't. The pictures were taken with her friends, her mother, her teacher. I ended up standing against the wall, hands shoved in my pockets, pretending I was just another spectator. When Clara asked, "Don't you want one with your dad?" Anna's cheeks flushed red. She shook her head. "He's not, I mean, it's fine." And just like that, the moment passed. The rejections grew sharper as she grew older. At 14, she told me not to drop her off in front of the school anymore. "Just stop at the corner," she said, eyes fixed on the window. "I don't want people asking questions." I wanted to ask what questions, but I already knew I was the question. I still remember the ache of pulling the car over a block away, watching her walk the rest of the distance alone. My hands clenched the steering wheel until my knuckles blanched, but I never said a word. That silence again, my old companion. Birthdays were the hardest. Every year I tried to make them special. One year I built her a bookshelf by hand, sanding it smooth, painting it in her favorite color. She took one look at it and frowned. "It's fine," she said before heading upstairs. Later that night I heard her tell a friend on the phone that she wished her real dad had been there. I never met the man she called real. I don't even know if he's alive. All I knew was that he had left long before I arrived, leaving a hole I could never fill, no matter how many shelves I built, no matter how many hours I worked. The cruelest cut came at her high school graduation. I had ironed my shirt 3 times, wanting to look my best. Clara and I found seats near the middle of the auditorium, my chest swelling with pride as I scanned the sea of graduates for Anna's cap. When she spotted us, she smiled at her mother. But when her eyes landed on me, the smile faltered. After the ceremony, as families gathered on the lawn, she posed for pictures. She stood between her friends, her cousins, her mother. When Clara gestured for me to join, Anna shook her head almost imperceptibly. "Just Mom," she whispered. So I stood behind the camera again, the invisible man capturing memories he would never belong to. That night Clara tried to comfort me. "She's young," she said softly, brushing my arm. "She doesn't know yet." But deep down, I wondered if she ever would. There was one night, not long after graduation, when I overheard her on the phone. "I don't care what he does," she snapped at whoever was on the other end. "He's just my stepfather, he's not family." The word slammed into me harder than any fist. Not family. I sat in the dark of the living room, the box of letters beside me, my hands trembling as I pulled one free. Clara's handwriting curled across the page. "Anna, if you're reading this, I want you to know that the man raising you chose you. He chose to love you when he didn't have to. That's worth more than blood." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears burning my eyes, but I didn't give it to her, not yet. I wasn't ready to break my promise. The pattern repeated for years. Weddings of family friends, baby showers, Thanksgiving dinners. At every table I found myself at the edge, occupying the seat no one else wanted. I was the afterthought, the spare chair, the extra name on the list. Sometimes she introduced me to strangers as my mom's husband. Other times she didn't introduce me at all, and each time I smiled, swallowed the hurt, and carried on. If you've never been invisible, you might think it's easy, but invisibility is heavy. It presses down on you, filling your lungs, weighing your steps. You learn to live with it, but you never stop feeling it. I tried to console myself with the thought that maybe, one day she would see, that maybe she just needed to grow older, to face life's storms herself before she understood what it meant to stand in the rain for someone else. But as the years went on, the rejections didn't soften, they hardened. And each no, each turned shoulder, each photograph without me in it, each one carved a little deeper into the man I was. Sometimes, when I couldn't sleep, I'd walk through the house and look at all the repairs I'd done. The patched roof, the shelves, the painted walls. My fingerprints were everywhere, invisible proof of a love she refused to see. And then I'd sit back down with the box of letters, running my hand over the lid, whispering to Clara's memory. When love, when will she be ready? The answer never came. But here's the truth I've learned after 70 years on this earth. Rejection is not the end of love. Love is stubborn. Love lingers even when it isn't returned. Love waits even when the waiting hurts. I carried that love through every rejection, every silence, every photograph where I was missing. Because somewhere deep inside me, I still believed what Clara had written in those letters. That one day the truth would break through. If you've ever been pushed aside, if you've ever given everything only to be told you don't belong, then maybe you understand. If you do, I ask you, stay with me. There is more to this story. There are still letters waiting to be read, still truths waiting to be uncovered. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Walk with me a little longer, because as painful as rejection is, it's only the middle of the story. The end is something else entirely. There are boxes we carry in life, literal ones filled with paper and ink, and invisible ones filled with memories too heavy to say out loud. Mine lived in the back of our bedroom closet. A shoebox, once holding a pair of leather boots I'd bought Clara before the sickness made her too weak to wear them. The boots were gone, but the box had stayed. Inside it, folded and refolded so many times the creases had turned soft, were letters. 23 of them. Letters Clara had written for Anna in the last year of her life. I became their keeper. The first time Clara told me about the letters was in the hospital. The chemo had already thinned her hair, her voice weak as paper. The monitors beeped steadily around us, that sterile rhythm of machines pretending they could hold back what we both knew was coming. "She'll hate you sometimes," Clara whispered, squeezing my hand. "She'll call you names, push you away. Don't fight it." I shook my head. "I can handle it." Her eyes searched mine. "Promise me when she's ready you'll give her these." She nodded to the drawer of her bedside table where the first stack of envelopes sat tied with ribbon. "What are they?" I asked. "Pieces of me," she said with a faint smile. "Words I won't be here to say. Reminders that she's loved and that you are more her father than anyone else ever could be." I couldn't speak. My throat closed, my chest ached. "Not now," she whispered. "She's too young. You'll know the right time. Until then, keep them safe." So I promised. And when Clara's eyes closed for the last time, I carried the letters home like a sacred flame. The first year after her death, I opened the box every night. Sometimes I read the letters. Sometimes I just held them, pressing my palm against the envelopes as though warmth could seep through paper. Clara's handwriting was steady and curved, each letter of each word shaped with care, as though she had known these would outlive her. I thought often of giving one to Anna. On her 13th birthday, when she blew out the candles with a group of friends but never glanced my way. On the first Christmas without Clara, when Anna locked herself in her room while I sat alone by the tree. Each time I picked up the box. Each time I set it back down, because she wasn't ready, and I was terrified that if I gave her the letters too soon, they would mean nothing, or worse, they would harden her heart further. Years went by and the shoebox moved with us, from the old house with the leaky roof to the rental when money got tight to the smaller place we bought when Anna went off to college. Always hidden, always waiting. Anna never asked about it. Why would she? It was just an old box in the back of a closet gathering dust. But to me, it was a heartbeat, a voice I still heard in the dark. Sometimes on lonely nights, I would read the letters out loud to myself as though Clara were speaking through me. "Dear Anna," one began, "if today is one of those days when you feel alone, I need you to remember this. You were never alone. You were always loved. Even when I'm gone, the love remains." Another read, "Your stepfather, though I hate that word, loves you more fiercely than you will ever know. Don't shut him out. He is the kind of man who shows love in work, in sacrifice, in silence. See him. Please see him." I'd close my eyes and imagine handing those words to Anna, watching them melt the ice between us. But when morning came and she brushed past me in the kitchen, barely mumbling hello, the fear returned. What if she didn't believe them? What if even her mother's words weren't enough? So back into the box they went. There was a summer, maybe 10 years ago, when Anna came home from college. She was older then, sharper, her life already stretching toward a world I didn't belong in. One night she asked me why I stayed, why I had married her mother when I could have had an easier life alone. I wanted to tell her about the letters, about the promise, about how Clara's love had stitched me to her, binding me in ways I could never undo. But instead I just said, because she was worth it, and so are you. She rolled her eyes, muttered something about cliches, and went upstairs. I went to the closet, pulled down the box, and whispered to Clara, "Not yet." The letters became both a burden and a lifeline. Some nights, they were the only thing keeping me from breaking. I'd imagine Anna finally opening them, reading her mother's words, realizing that all my sacrifices weren't invisible after all. Other nights, the weight of them nearly crushed me. Each envelope felt like a stone I carried, pressing down harder with every year I kept them hidden. But a promise is a promise, and I had given mine on the last day of Clara's life. Looking back now, I wonder if I waited too long. Maybe if I'd given her just one, on a birthday or a graduation or the day she first called me stepfather with venom in her voice, maybe things would have been different. But fear kept me silent. Fear and the fragile hope that timing might someday be right. So the letters remained sealed, patient as stone, while our relationship fractured further. Sometimes I imagine Clara watching us from wherever she is. I wonder if she's disappointed or if she understands why I kept waiting. I picture her shaking her head, that soft smile of hers spreading as she says, "You always were too patient." And maybe she's right, but patience was the only weapon I had. The irony is that Anna always believed I kept secrets from her. She used to accuse me of it, especially in her teenage years. "You never tell me anything," she'd snap. And I'd think, if only you knew. If only she knew that in the closet in an old shoebox, her mother's voice waited for her. If only she knew that the truth of how much she was loved, by Clara, by me, was written down, ink on paper, ready to shatter the walls she had built. But walls take years to crumble, and sometimes they only fall when life itself delivers the final blow. I sit here now at 68 looking at the box once more. My hands are weaker, my breath shorter. The time ahead is far less than the time behind. And I wonder, was I wrong to wait? Did I mistake silence for love when love should have been louder? Maybe. But I also know this. When she finally did read them, when her hands trembled over the paper, when her tears fell on her mother's handwriting, those letters carried more power than I ever could have given them on my own. That was Clara's gift. That was her final miracle. If you're still here with me, listening to this old man ramble about boxes and promises, I want you to know, sometimes the hardest part of love is waiting. Waiting to be seen. Waiting to be heard. Waiting for the right time. If you've ever waited like that, hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to walk with me further, because the waiting is only part of the story. Soon the box would open, and nothing would ever be the same. The distance didn't appear all at once. It built itself slowly, like frost on a window. At first you don't notice it, just a thin mist that blurs the edges. But with each cold night it thickens, hardens, until one morning you wake up and realize you can't see through it at all. That was what happened between Anna and me. The distance built itself quietly, one small moment stacked on top of another, until there was a wall so high I couldn't see her anymore. After Clara died, Anna and I lived in the same house, but it never felt like home again. The meals grew quieter. She started eating dinner in her room, leaving her plate untouched at the table. I'd sit alone, spoon clinking against the bowl, staring at the empty chair where her laughter used to sit. I tried to fill the silence with questions. How was school? Did you make any new friends? Need help with your homework? She answered with one word, sometimes just a shrug. I told myself it was grief, that she was hurting, that time would soften the edges. But time didn't heal, it hardened. When she turned 18 and moved out for college, I thought maybe space would help. Maybe if she had her own life, she'd look back with softer eyes. But college only stretched the distance further. Her phone calls became rare. Birthdays passed with a quick text, "Thanks." Holidays were a tug of war. Sometimes she came home, sometimes she stayed away, always with an excuse that stung more than it should have. One Thanksgiving, she arrived late with friends, barely acknowledging me. She ate quickly, laughed at stories I wasn't a part of, then disappeared upstairs. I sat at the table long after the plates were cleared, listening to the echo of voices that didn't need me. The distance wasn't always cruel. Sometimes it was worse. It was casual. When she got her first job out of college, she called Clara's sister to share the news, but not me. When she moved into her first apartment, she invited her friends to help unpack, not me. When she posted pictures of her new life online, I wasn't in them. I became a ghost, alive but fading from her story. Still, I tried. I mailed her care packages, homemade cookies, gas cards, a sweater when the winters grew harsh. She never mentioned them. Once, weeks after I sent a box, I saw the sweater crumpled on her couch when I visited. The tag was still on. I asked if it fit. "It's fine," she said, eyes on her phone. It was always fine, never good, never thank you, just fine. As the years passed, she built her life brick by brick, career, friends, a new family of her own. Each brick pushed me further outside the circle. When she bought a house with her husband, I offered to help with repairs. "No need," she said. When she had her first child, I knitted a blanket by hand. "Thanks," she muttered, folding it into a drawer. Every gesture of mine landed in the same place. Nowhere. I remember one night sitting on my porch staring at the stars. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears. I thought about walking away, about letting the distance finish its work, letting her forget me entirely. After all, wasn't that what she wanted? But then I thought of Clara, her voice in that hospital room. Love her as if she were yours. So I stayed. Even when the distance grew unbearable, even when it hollowed me out, I stayed. It's funny how distance doesn't just separate people, it changes them. Anna's distance turned her sharper, harder. Every conversation was clipped, businesslike. She asked about bills, about logistics, never about me. My distance, on the other hand, made me softer. I found myself bending backward just to catch a glimpse of her, just to hear her laugh. I watered every scrap of attention she gave me like a dying plant. It wasn't a relationship, it was survival. The worst part was the holidays, Christmas especially. Clara had loved Christmas, the music, the decorations, the smell of cinnamon rolls in the oven. After she died, I tried to keep the traditions alive. I hung the lights, baked the rolls, wrapped gifts with care. Anna barely noticed. One Christmas, she brought her boyfriend, introducing him with a smile I hadn't seen in years. She gave him the best seat by the fire, laughed at his jokes, let him carve the turkey. I sat at the edge of the couch, pretending not to notice that she had erased me from the center of our home. Later that night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat by the tree alone. The lights blinked, steady and indifferent. I thought about Clara, about the letters waiting in the box upstairs, about the promise I was still holding. The distance felt endless. People ask why I didn't just hand her the letters then. Why not bridge the gap with her mother's words? The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid she would read them and shrug, the way she shrugged at my sweaters and my shelves. Afraid she would crumple them up, dismissing Clara's voice the way she dismissed mine. Afraid that if I gave her the letters too soon, I would lose the last hope I had. So I let the distance grow, even as it starved me. There was one moment, though, that stays with me. Her little boy, my grandson, was playing on the floor with toy cars. He pushed one into my shoe, looked up, and grinned. For the first time in years, someone with her eyes saw me. I lifted him into my lap and he laughed, a pure, ringing laugh that filled the room. Anna glanced over. For a flicker of a second, I thought I saw something soften in her face, but then it vanished. She turned back to her phone and the wall rose up again. Still, that moment was enough to keep me going. Enough to remind me that maybe one day she would let the wall crack. Distance is not always measured in miles. Sometimes it's measured in the number of words left unsaid, the number of empty chairs at the table, the number of letters unopened in a box upstairs. For 20 years, Anna and I lived inside that distance. She built her life further and further away, and I stayed, always one step behind, carrying love like a shadow. But shadows have weight, and mine was growing heavier by the day. If you're still here with me, thank you. These memories are not easy to speak, but they are part of the truth. If you've ever felt the cold of distance from someone you love, you'll understand why I kept holding on. Hit the like button if you know that kind of ache. Subscribe if you want to follow me further. Because as wide as the distance grew, the story didn't end there. The story was waiting for the day it all broke open. And it would sooner than either of us expected. There are words that bruise, and then there are words that break. I had lived through years of being overlooked, through the silent distance that stretched between us, through birthdays and holidays where I was invisible. I thought I had grown a thick enough skin to bear it. But one night, Anna's words shattered something inside me that had been fragile all along. It was an ordinary evening, if you could call any evening ordinary when it carried so much weight. She and her husband had invited me over for dinner. That in itself was rare. I spent the whole day rehearsing how to be pleasant, how to avoid embarrassing her, how to smile without showing too much of the loneliness inside me. I even polished my shoes, something I hadn't done in years. At 70, you don't fuss over appearances much, but that night I did. I told myself, she invited you, that has to mean something. The house smelled of garlic bread and roasted chicken. Her little boy ran to greet me at the door, his laughter ringing like bells. I picked him up, let him tug at my hair, felt the warmth of small arms around my neck. For a moment my heart unclenched. Anna appeared in the hallway, arms crossed. "You're here," she said flatly. I nodded, setting the boy down. "Thanks for inviting me." She shrugged, already turning away. "It was his idea," she muttered, nodding toward her husband. Dinner was polite at first. Her husband asked about my health, about the garage I used to run. Anna stayed mostly silent, cutting her food into neat pieces, eyes fixed on her plate. I tried. I asked about her work, about her son's school, about her plans for the summer. Each answer was short, clipped, as if words cost her too much to spend on me. Finally, after a long silence, I said softly, "Anna, I know we've had our differences, but I want you to know I've always loved you. Always." The words hung in the air, trembling like glass. She looked up at me then, her eyes sharp as knives, and she said the sentence that will echo in me until my last breath. "You're not my father, you're just my stepfather." It wasn't shouted, it wasn't screamed in anger, that might have hurt less. No, it was said coldly, calmly, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. Just my stepfather. The words sliced through me. Years of sacrifices, of roofs patched in snowstorms, of late-night drives to keep her safe, of paychecks stretched thin so she could have what she wanted, all of it reduced to that single word, just. I stared at her, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. My chest tightened, a dull ache spreading through my ribs. Her husband shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. "Anna," he began. But she waved him off, her face set like stone. I wanted to argue, to say, "Do you know what I've given? Do you know what your mother asked of me? Do you know how many nights I've sat awake, loving you when you wouldn't even look at me?" I wanted to shout, to shake her, to break the silence that had buried me for so long. But when I opened my mouth, no words came. Only the echo of Clara's voice in my head. "Don't fight it. Love her as if she were yours." So I closed my mouth, lowered my eyes, and let the words settle into me like a nail driven into wood. After dinner, I helped clear the table. Anna didn't thank me, she barely looked at me. When I left, her son hugged my leg, asking when I'd come back. Anna stood by the door, arms folded again. No smile, no goodbye. I walked down the steps, the night air biting at my skin. My polished shoes clicked against the pavement, too bright, too hopeful for a night that had turned so dark. At home, I went straight to the closet. I pulled down the shoebox, opened the lid, and spread the letters out on the bed. I read them one by one, my tears blurring the ink. Clara's words filled the room like music. "Anna, love is not about blood, it's about choice. And the man who chose to love you is worth more than any man who simply gave you life. When you are angry at him, remember, he stayed. He always stayed. Don't push him away. One day you'll regret it." I clutched the letters to my chest and sobbed like a child. 70 years old and still undone by the word stepfather. The days that followed were heavy. I moved through them like a shadow. At the grocery store, I forgot what I came for. At church, I couldn't sing the hymns. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words until they carved themselves into me. You're not my father, you're just my stepfather. How easily she had dismissed me. How casually she had erased a lifetime. But love is stubborn. Even as my heart broke, I found myself forgiving her. Not because she asked for it, but because that's what love does. It forgives even when it shouldn't. I told myself she didn't mean it, that she was tired or stressed or caught in a moment of weakness. But deep down, I knew she meant every word, and still, I loved her. That night, I whispered into the dark, "I'm still here, Anna. I'll always be here." No answer came, just silence. If you've ever been reduced to a word, just only not enough, you know how it feels. It doesn't just wound, it defines, it brands you. For me, that brand was stepfather. A role I embraced, a role I lived, a role I carried until it became heavier than my own name. But here's the truth. Sometimes the cruelest statements are not the end of the story. Sometimes they are the moment before everything changes. I didn't know it then, but that night when Anna called me, the story was already bending towards something else. Something I had been waiting 20 years to see. If you've stayed with me through this, thank you. I know it's not easy to hear the ugly parts of love, but they matter. If you've ever been called just when you were giving everything, hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to keep walking with me, because the cruelest words were not the last. The letters were still waiting, and one day soon, they would speak louder than Anna's silence ever could. Illness has a way of stripping a man down to his truest self. You can spend a lifetime working, giving, pretending to be strong, but when sickness comes, it takes off the armor piece by piece. What's left is raw, fragile, and often forgotten. For me, the first sign was breath. Something so simple, so ordinary, yet suddenly so difficult. One morning, I woke up gasping. My chest felt heavy, as though someone had stacked bricks on top of me during the night. I sat at the edge of the bed, clutching my ribs, waiting for the air to come back. It didn't. The doctor called it heart failure. "Your ticker's getting tired," he said gently, his eyes soft in a way that only made me feel older. He gave me a list of pills, a schedule, a warning to take it slow. Take it slow. As if I hadn't already spent my whole life waiting. The illness brought with it a silence of a different kind. No longer the silence of rejection, but the silence of empty rooms, of unanswered phones. I called Anna when I was admitted to the hospital. The call went to voicemail. I left a message, my voice cracking, telling her I was okay, that she didn't need to worry. I waited 2 days for her to call back. She never did. Her husband came by once, flowers in hand, awkward sympathy in his eyes. "She's busy with work," he said, as though that explained everything. I nodded, smiling weakly. But inside, I felt the truth gnawing. My daughter, my stepdaughter, didn't care if I lived or died. Nights in the hospital were the worst. Machines hummed, nurses' shoes squeaked in the hallways, but inside my room it was just me and the shoebox. Yes, I brought it with me. I couldn't leave it behind. What if I never made it home again? What if the letters were lost, buried among the forgotten belongings of an old man no one claimed? So I kept the box on the chair beside my bed, within reach. Some nights I would open it, running my fingers over the envelopes, hearing Clara's voice in the rustle of paper. "Not yet," she seemed to whisper, but I was afraid that not yet was running out of time. The nurses grew curious. One asked what was in the box. "Love," I said simply. She laughed softly, thinking I was joking, but I wasn't. That box was the purest love I had ever known. Clara's love for Anna, my love for them both, bound together in ink and promise. There were days when I thought about giving up. Lying there with tubes in my arms, listening to the steady beep of the monitor, I wondered what difference it would make if I slipped away quietly. Would Anna even notice? Would she cry? Or would she simply say, "He was just my stepfather," and move on? The thought hollowed me out, but then I'd remember her son, the way his little hands had gripped mine, the way he had laughed with pure joy. He was proof that love could skip generations, that maybe what I couldn't give to Anna I could still give to him. That thought kept me breathing. On one particularly dark night, when the pain in my chest was sharp and unrelenting, I pulled out one of Clara's letters and read it aloud. Anna, if you're angry with him, forgive him. If you feel distant, remember his silence is not absence. It is love in disguise. He will never stop loving you, not even when it hurts. I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks. Clara, I whispered, I don't know how much longer I can wait. The monitor beeped steadily, indifferent to my despair. It was around that time that a friend, an old neighbor, visited. She sat by my bed, holding my hand, listening as I poured out years of silence. She doesn't see me, I admitted, voice trembling. She never did, and now I don't think she ever will. The neighbor looked at the shoebox, then at me. Maybe it's time, she said softly. Maybe you don't wait for the perfect moment, maybe you make it. Her words lodged in me like a seed. But courage is a strange thing. You can face storms, hunger, and loss, but still falter at the thought of handing your heart to someone who might throw it away. So I kept the letters close but unopened. Anna didn't come. Not for the procedures, not for the long nights, not for the recovery. Her absence cut deeper than the illness ever could. When I was discharged, the doctor warned me to take it easy. No more overexerting yourself, he said. Listen to your body. But my body wasn't the problem. My heart had been tired long before it grew sick. I went home, the shoebox in my arms like a lifeline. The house felt colder than ever. The walls echoed with silence. I sat in my chair by the window, watching the world go on without me, wondering if Anna even knew how close she was to losing me. It's strange, the things you think about when you're sick. Not the big moments, but the small ones. Her first piano recital. The way she clutched her stuffed rabbit on her first day of school. The sound of her laughter before she grew old enough to push me away. I held onto those fragments, fragile as glass, because they reminded me there was once a time, however brief, when we weren't so far apart. If you've ever faced illness, you know it doesn't just weaken the body. It weakens the walls you've built around your heart. Lying there, fragile and worn, I realized how badly I wanted her to see me, before it was too late. That want burned brighter than the pain. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. I know these chapters are heavy, but illness is part of the story too. If you've ever felt forgotten in your sickness, if you've ever longed for someone who never came, hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to keep walking with me. Because the illness wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something I couldn't see yet. The day would come when the letters would no longer stay hidden. Confrontations don't always arrive with fists slamming on tables or voices raised to thunder. Sometimes they arrive softly, carried by people who love you enough to say what you don't want to hear. Mine came one evening, as the sun dipped low and painted my living room walls the color of old gold. I was sitting in my chair by the window, shoebox beside me as always, when I heard a knock at the door. It was Paul, an old friend from the garage days. He still carried the smell of engine grease on his jacket, though his hair had gone grayer than mine. "You look thinner," he said the moment he stepped inside, frowning at me. I smiled weakly. "The doctors call it progress." We sat for a while, sipping weak coffee. Paul talked about the old days, customers who never paid on time, cars that fell apart no matter how hard we worked on them. I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that echoes in an empty house. After a long silence, he set his cup down. "Why hasn't Anna been here?" The question landed heavier than any tool I'd ever lifted in that garage. I shrugged. "She's busy. Work, family, you know how it is." He shook his head. "No, I don't. You're her father. You nearly died in that hospital and she didn't even come." The word father cut me deeper than he realized. "She doesn't see me that way," I whispered. "Then make her see," Paul said firmly. "Stop waiting. Tell her, show her. You've been silent too long." That night after he left, I sat with the shoebox open, Clara's words spread across my lap. The letters seemed to glow in the dim light, each one whispering, "Enough waiting." But fear held me still. What if Anna rejected even these? What if her mother's words couldn't reach her? Days later, the confrontation came again, this time from my neighbor, Mrs. Lewis. She was 82, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She found me struggling to carry groceries from the car. "Where's your daughter?" she demanded, taking one bag from my hands. "She's busy," I mumbled. Mrs. Lewis snorted. "Too busy for her sick father. You ought to call her, tell her what you need." I wanted to tell her everything, that Anna wasn't mine by blood, that she never wanted me, that calling her only widened the silence. But instead I just nodded. Inside, though, her words churned. I tried calling Anna that night. The phone rang 4 times before her voice answered, cool and distant. "Hello. Hi, Anna, it's me." A pause. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said, though everything was. "I just wanted to hear your voice." She sighed. "Dad's sorry. Stepdad's, I'm busy. Can we talk later?" Before I could answer, the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, my heart pounding. Even when I reached out, she pulled away. The confrontation I dreaded finally came face to face. It was a week later, after Paul must have spoken to her husband. One evening there was another knock on the door. I opened it to find Anna standing there, arms folded, expression guarded. "We need to talk," she said. I stepped aside, heart racing. She walked in, glancing at the shoebox on the table. "What's that?" "Your mother's letters," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp. "Letters." I nodded. "She wrote them for you before she died. I've kept them all these years." Silence stretched between us. Finally she spoke. "Why didn't you ever give them to me?" I swallowed hard. "Because she asked me to wait. She said I'd know when you were ready." Anna's laugh was bitter. "So you decided I wasn't, for 20 years. Do you have any idea how that feels? Knowing my own mother left me words I never got to read." Her voice cracked, anger spilling out like water from a broken dam. "I grew up thinking you were hiding things from me, that you weren't telling me the truth, and now I find out you've been sitting on this all along." Tears burned my eyes. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to protect you, to honor her." She shook her head, pacing the room. "Protect me or protect yourself. Maybe you were afraid I'd still hate you after reading them." The words stung because they were true. I stood slowly, gripping the back of the chair for balance. "Anna, I have never stopped loving you. Every silence, every rejection, every cold word, I took it because I promised your mother I would. These letters are hers, but the love behind them is ours. Please don't shut them out." She froze, her back to me. Her shoulders trembled. For a moment I thought she might turn, might soften. But then she whispered, "I don't know if I can forgive you." And she walked out, leaving the door wide open, the night air rushing in. I sank into the chair, the shoebox still open, letters scattered like fallen leaves. My hands shook as I gathered them up. Clara's voice echoed in my mind. "Don't fight it. Love her as if she were yours." I whispered into the empty room, "I'm trying, Clara. I've been trying for 20 years. Confrontations don't always end in resolution. Sometimes they end in broken pieces, scattered on the floor. But sometimes those pieces are the beginning of something new." I didn't know it then, but that night when Anna saw the letters for the first time, a crack formed in the wall between us. And through that crack, the light was waiting. If you've ever faced a confrontation that left you shaking, if you've ever spoken your heart only to have it misunderstood, then maybe you know this ache. If you do, hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to keep walking with me, because the confrontation wasn't the end. The revelation was coming. And when it came, it would break us both open. Some truths arrive like thunder, loud, sudden, shaking the earth beneath you. Others come like dawn, slow and quiet, slipping into the cracks of the night until the whole room is filled with light. Anna's revelation came somewhere between the two. It happened on a gray afternoon, weeks after our confrontation. I had heard nothing from her since that night she stormed out of my house, her words still echoing. "I don't know if I can forgive you." The shoebox sat untouched on the table. I couldn't bring myself to hide it again. It felt like burying Clara twice. And then one knock at the door. When I opened it, Anna stood there. She looked different, not angry this time, but tired, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. She didn't speak at first. She just nodded toward the shoebox. "Can I see them?" she whispered. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, as if the air itself were heavy. Her hands trembled when she reached for the box. "Are you sure?" I asked softly. She nodded, biting her lip. "I need to know." So I lifted the lid just as I had done 1,000 times before, but this time I let her hands, not mine, pick up the first envelope. The letter was dated 2 weeks before Clara died. Anna unfolded it carefully, her breath shallow. "My dearest Anna, The words began, written in Clara's careful, flowing script. If you are reading this, I am gone, but I want you to know you were my joy, my song, my reason for every sunrise. Anna's lips quivered. She read on silently, her eyes darting across the page. Then suddenly she gasped. Love the man sitting beside you, Clara had written. He is not just your stepfather, he is the father who chose you. That kind of love is rare, Anna. Don't throw it away. Anna dropped the letter as though it burned her. Her hands flew to her face, muffling a sob. I reached out instinctively, then stopped. For years she had pulled away from my touch. I didn't want to frighten her. But then through her tears she whispered, she knew I hated you sometimes. She knew, I said gently, and she forgave you before you ever asked. Anna picked up another letter, then another. With each one her sobs grew harder. He stayed when others left. He built his life around you. Don't measure love by blood, measure it by sacrifice. The words tumbled into her heart, tearing down walls brick by brick. I watched her break open in front of me, and I broke too, not from pain this time, but from the weight of finally being seen. For 20 years I had waited for this moment, and now, sitting across from her, I realized it wasn't triumph I felt. It was release. Release from silence. Release from invisibility. Release from being just. Anna looked up at me, tears streaking her face. Why didn't you tell me? She cried. Because your mother asked me to wait, I said, my own tears falling freely. And because I was afraid that even her words wouldn't reach you, but I was wrong. She pressed a hand against her mouth, shaking. I thought you never wanted to be my father. I thought you stayed out of guilt or obligation. No, I whispered. I stayed because I chose you. Every day I chose you. The letters lay scattered between us, the living voice of a woman gone 2 decades. Anna picked one up again, her fingers trembling. She loved you so much, she whispered. I nodded. And she wanted you to know I loved you too. The silence that followed was different this time, not heavy, not cruel. It was the kind of silence that lets love breathe. She stayed for hours that day, reading every single letter. Sometimes she read aloud, her voice cracking. Sometimes she pressed them to her chest as though to keep her mother close. I didn't interrupt. I just sat there watching the walls crumble, watching the light spill in. At one point she looked at me with eyes I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. Soft, searching, filled with something like recognition. I've been so cruel to you, she whispered. You were hurting, I said, but you didn't deserve it. I shook my head. Love isn't about deserving, it's about staying. And I stayed. That evening, as she gathered the letters carefully back into the box, she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. It was the first time in decades she had touched me willingly. Dad, she said softly, just one word, but it was enough. The sound of it was like the first light of dawn after a long, endless night. Revelation is not just about seeing the truth. It's about letting the truth change you. That day, Anna saw me. Not as a shadow, not as just, but as the father I had always tried to be. And though the years of silence and rejection couldn't be erased, they no longer defined us. The letters had done their work. Clara had spoken across time, and her voice had finally reached the heart of her daughter. If you've ever longed to be seen, if you've ever waited years for someone to understand the love you carried, then maybe you know what this moment meant to me. If you do, I ask you, stay with me. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, because the revelation wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something new. Tears are strange things. They can come suddenly, like a storm breaking after weeks of drought, or they can creep in slowly, welling up from places you didn't even know were dry. For 20 years I had cried my tears alone, quietly in the shadows where no one could see them. But when Anna opened the letters, when she let her mother's words sink into her bones, something inside her cracked wide open. And for the first time her tears were not mine alone to carry. That night, after she read the last letter, Anna sat on the floor, her knees pulled to her chest. The shoebox lay open beside her, envelopes scattered like autumn leaves. Her sobs filled the room, raw and unrestrained. I had imagined this moment for years, but I hadn't pictured it like this. I thought maybe she would cry softly, dignified tears, but these were the tears of a child who had been lost for too long. Between sobs, she whispered, "I thought you didn't care about me. I thought you didn't care." I knelt beside her, ignoring the ache in my knees. She cared with her last breath, and I cared with every one of mine. Her face crumpled and she buried it in my shoulder. The feel of her tears soaking into my shirt was the holiest baptism I've ever known. The hours that followed were a flood. She cried for her mother, gone too soon. She cried for the birthdays missed, for the graduations where she'd looked past me, for the dinners where silence had been her only gift to me. "I was so blind," she wept. "All those years you were there and I didn't see you." I stroked her hair gently as I once had when she was little. "You don't have to apologize, love doesn't keep score." But inside I felt each word heal a scar I thought would never close. At one point she pulled away, her eyes red and swollen. "Do you hate me?" I almost laughed through my own tears. "Hate you, Anna. You are the closest thing to grace I've ever known. You may have wounded me, but you've also given me a reason to stay alive. No, I don't hate you. I never could." Her lip trembled. "All those times I called you stepfather." "I know," I said softly. "And I knew you didn't mean the word as lightly as you said it. It came from pain. I understood." She shook her head. "But you deserved better." "Maybe," I admitted. "But love doesn't choose what it deserves. It chooses who it stays for, and I stayed." The tears didn't stop that night. They followed into the next day when she called me unexpectedly just to say, "I can't stop thinking about Mom's letters." Her voice cracked, and I heard fresh tears on the other end of the line. They followed into the next week when she came over again and asked to see the letters once more. We read them together, pausing often because neither of us could see through our tears. Sometimes she cried in silence, her hand gripping mine. Sometimes she wept out loud, her body shaking. And sometimes she looked at me with a mix of sorrow and awe, as though she couldn't believe the love she'd ignored was sitting right in front of her all along. There was one moment I'll never forget. She read a letter that Clara had written for Anna's wedding day, an event Clara had known she wouldn't live to see. "Anna, when you walk down the aisle, know that I am walking with you in spirit. And if you feel a hand steadying you, remember, it might not be mine, but it will be his. He will love you on that day as fiercely as I would have." Anna broke then. She pressed the paper to her lips, rocking back and forth, sobbing like the little girl I once carried on my shoulders. "I didn't let you walk me down the aisle," she choked out, staring at me through the blur of her tears. "I didn't even ask. I told people you were just my mom's husband. I erased you." I felt my own tears blur the room. "You didn't erase me. I was there. Maybe not beside you, but I was there. I always was." She collapsed into me, her tears drenching my shirt once more. It's hard to explain what it feels like to be finally seen after decades of invisibility. The closest I can come is this. Imagine being underwater for 20 years, lungs burning, desperate for air, and then finally breaking the surface. That's what her tears felt like. They weren't just grief. They were recognition, recognition of me. Her little boy wandered into the room once, rubbing his eyes. "Mommy, why are you crying?" he asked softly. Anna pulled him into her lap, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Because I didn't see how much Grandpa loved me." The word grandpa hit me like a blessing. My tears fell harder. The boy looked at me curiously, then wrapped his arms around us both. "I love you, Grandpa," he said. 3 generations bound together by tears. Clara's love, Anna's revelation, my persistence, all woven into that one moment. In the days that followed, the tears softened. They weren't always sharp and painful anymore. Sometimes they were gentle, cleansing. Anna began to call me more. She invited me to dinner. She introduced me to her friends as my dad. Each time I felt another wall crumble, but she still cried often. Guilt, regret, longing, they don't disappear overnight, and I let her cry, because for 20 years I had carried all the tears alone. Now we carried them together. If you've ever waited for someone's tears to fall, if you've ever longed for that moment when love finally breaks through, you'll understand why I treasure every one of Anna's sobs. They weren't weakness. They were proof. Proof that she saw me. Proof that Clara's letters had done their work. Proof that love, though buried, had never died. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Thank you for sharing these tears with me. If you know what it is to cry from both pain and healing, hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, because the tears were not the end. They were the beginning of forgiveness. And forgiveness, like tears, can unfold in ways you never expect. Reconciliation is not a single moment. It's not a switch you flip or a door you open once and walk through forever. It's a slow unfolding, like a bud turning into a flower, one petal at a time. For Anna and me, it began with tears, but it grew into something larger, something I had almost stopped hoping for: belonging. The first time she called me Dad after the letters, it felt like the air itself stilled. We were sitting at her kitchen table. Her son was playing with toy blocks on the floor, building towers only to knock them down again. She was talking about bills, about her long work hours, about the exhaustion of being a mother. I listened quietly, as I always had. Then she sighed, rubbed her temples, and said, "Dad, what would you do if?" The words slipped out so naturally that she didn't notice at first. But I did. I froze, staring at her as though the room had gone holy. My heart beat in my ears. She caught herself, color rising in her cheeks. I reached across the table and took her hand. "No, don't take it back." Her lip trembled, but she didn't pull away. For the first time, she let my hand stay there, covering hers. And in that moment, I felt 20 years of silence lift. Reconciliation didn't mean everything became perfect overnight. There were still sharp edges. She still stumbled sometimes, still caught herself introducing me as my mom's husband before correcting to my dad. She still wrestled with guilt, with the years we had lost, but there was effort now, effort I had never seen before. She called me. She invited me. She asked for advice. Small things, maybe, but to me they were miracles. One day she asked if I would come with her to visit Clara's grave. We drove together, quiet most of the way. At the cemetery, she carried the shoebox of letters against her chest, as though it were an infant she needed to protect. We stood before the headstone, the grass neatly trimmed, the stone weathered but still strong. Anna knelt, placing the box gently at its base. "I read them all, Mom," she whispered, her tears falling onto the stone. "And I see him now. I see what you wanted me to see." She reached back for my hand. I knelt beside her, my knees protesting but my heart steady. Together we prayed, not for Clara because I believe she was already at peace, but for ourselves. For the years lost and the years still left. After that, things changed faster. She started inviting me to her son's school events. "Grandpa," she would call across the gym, waving me over. Parents turned, smiling politely, and I almost laughed at the strangeness of it. For years, I had been the invisible man in the bleachers. Now, suddenly, I was wanted. Her boy would run to me after soccer games, shouting, "Did you see me, Grandpa?" And I'd shout back, "I saw every second." Sometimes I'd glance at Anna and see her watching us. Her eyes would soften, guilt flickering in them still. But beneath it was pride, the pride of a daughter finally letting herself love her father. The deepest reconciliation came one quiet evening, long after her son had gone to bed. We sat on her porch, the night air cool, the stars faint against the city's glow. She turned to me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I wasted so much time," she whispered. I shook my head. "Time wasted is only wasted if you don't learn from it, and you've learned." She swallowed hard. "Do you forgive me?" The question nearly broke me. "Anna," I said softly, "I forgave you before you even hurt me. I forgave you the first time you turned away, because that's what love does. It forgives, even before it's asked." Her tears spilled over. She leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. For the first time since she was a child, I held her like that, feeling her weight, her trust. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a stepfather. I felt like a dad. Reconciliation also meant honesty. There were moments when she confessed things that cut deep. How she had been embarrassed of me at school, how she had wished her real dad would return, how she had told friends I wasn't family. Each confession was a knife, but I let it cut, because with each wound came healing. "I was so wrong," she said one night, voice breaking. "You were there the whole time and I was too blind to see it." I brushed a tear from her cheek. "Then see me now, that's enough." We began making new memories. Sunday dinners at her house, where she insisted I sit at the head of the table. Road trips to small towns, where her son sat in the backseat asking endless questions and I answered each one with a smile. Christmas mornings where she handed me a gift labeled to Dad, and I had to look away so they wouldn't see my tears. It was never about replacing the lost years. It was about building what we could with the years we had left. I often think of Clara in those moments. I wonder if she sees us, Anna's head on my shoulder, her son calling me Grandpa, the shoebox finally empty because the letters had done their work. I like to believe she does, and I like to believe she's smiling. If you've ever reconciled with someone after years of silence, you know it doesn't erase the pain, but it transforms it. It turns wounds into scars and scars into stories you carry with pride. Anna and I will always carry the scars, but now we carry them together. If you've walked this journey with me, thank you. If you've ever longed for reconciliation, if you've ever dreamed of hearing the words dad or mom or simply I see you from someone who once pushed you away, then you know how holy this feels. Hit the like button if you believe in second chances. Subscribe if you want to follow me into the final chapter, because reconciliation was not the end. The legacy was still to come. Legacy is not money. It is not property or titles or even the family name written neatly on a headstone. Legacy is love carried forward, love that outlives the body, love that ripples through time long after the voice is gone. For years, I thought I had no legacy. I wasn't Anna's real father. I wasn't in the photographs. I wasn't the one she bragged about. To her, I was just a step in her story, a footnote, a shadow at the edge of every celebration. But as I sit here now, with the years behind me heavier than the ones ahead, I see it differently. My legacy has always been there. It just took time, 20 years and a box of letters for it to come into the light. These days, Anna calls me more often than I ever thought possible. Sometimes it's practical questions about repairs, about finances, about raising her boy. But sometimes it's just to say, "How are you, Dad?" That one word still makes me pause every time. Dad, simple, ordinary to some, but to me, it is the crown I never thought I would wear. Her son, my grandson, runs to me when I visit. He begs me to play cars on the carpet to tell him stories of when his mother was young. And when I tuck him into bed, he whispers, "Good night, Grandpa, I love you." I look at Anna then, standing in the doorway, and she smiles with tears in her eyes, because she knows I will live in her son's heart in a way I struggled to live in hers. That, too, is legacy. We still read Clara's letters sometimes, not all at once anymore. Just one here, one there on nights when the grief feels close or the world feels heavy. Anna keeps the shoebox now. It sits on her shelf in plain view, not hidden in the back of a closet. She told me once, "I want my son to see it, to know that love is something you choose." Every time she says that, I feel Clara's presence like a warm hand on my shoulder. She was right. Love chosen is love eternal. But legacy isn't just what we pass down in words. It's what we live out daily. For me, it means showing up still, even when my legs ache, even when the doctor tells me to slow down. It means sitting at Anna's table and carving the Thanksgiving turkey with steady hands while she looks at me with quiet gratitude. It means walking her son to school and hearing him shout, "That's my grandpa," to his friends. I once thought my life story would end in invisibility, that I would be the man no one remembered. But now I see, invisibility was never the end. It was the waiting place. Legacy was always waiting on the other side of patience. Reconciliation taught me something important. You can't control when someone will see you or how. All you can control is the love you give in the meantime. For me, that love was measured in patched roofs, in long nights at the hospital, in shoeboxes filled with letters I never wrote but faithfully kept. And now, that love is measured in Anna's voice when she says Dad, in her son's laughter when he calls me Grandpa, in the quiet peace that fills my chest when I think of Clara and know I kept my promise. I sometimes wonder how I will be remembered when I'm gone. Maybe they won't talk about the garage I ran or the money I never had. Maybe they won't remember the countless invisible sacrifices. But maybe Anna will tell her son, "Your grandpa wasn't my father by blood. He was something better. He was the man who chose me." And maybe her son will tell his children the same. If that's my legacy, it is enough, more than enough. So if you're listening now, if you've walked through all 12 chapters of this story with me, I want you to carry something too. Love is not measured by blood. It is measured by staying, by sacrificing quietly, by choosing over and over again, even when you are unseen. That is the legacy worth leaving. Thank you for staying with me through this long journey. Thank you for listening to an old man's story of silence, letters, tears, and reconciliation. If this story has touched you, if you've ever been unseen, or if you've ever longed to be chosen, know this: you are not alone. Please like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories of love, pain, and redemption. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that chosen love is still love. From my heart to yours, may you and your family know peace, health, and happiness. May you cherish the fathers and mothers, the stepfathers and stepmothers, the grandparents and guardians who stayed, even when it was hard. Because in the end, that is the true legacy.